Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Jason.
With me today is life coach and LOA teacher Joel Elston.
This is your daily dose of happy. We are so happy you decided to join us today.
And Joel and I were getting each other kind of built up by laughing at a lot of the crazy stuff going on in the world today, which is probably an important thing to do because we're going to address a topic that initially starts off in a rather rough space. And so it's always good whenever you're going to look at something like that to do something from a high vibe place. So Joel, I think we did a good job in the pre-show, in the green room, kind of getting ourselves into a good place to talk about this.
Sure. And as I was telling you, I'm in the audience, because what we're going to be talking about will have some, pretty rough things to hear in the beginning. But by the end of the show, we're also going to have some really good stories that sort of maybe will counteract some of that.
Which is a good thing, a very good
Yes.
thing. Now, this all comes out of a post. You posted something that made me aware. I had no idea that November is National Adoption Month until I saw your post. I mean, so Thank you for making me aware of that. And I think I have a pretty good idea of why you posted that one. But why don't you bring people up to speed? For those very few people, probably like 3 who are listeners who have never heard your story about all the different roles you played in adoption. Just give people a background about why it is that adoption is such a big thing for you.
Well, one of the things that, I've always been concerned. It always seemed very sad that we had children in the United States that just had no family and they were placed into foster care. And that was something that was always really sad to me. And I had a lot of struggles with addiction in my 20s. And, I never got married and had a lot of crazy relationships. But I always pictured myself being a dad. And one of the things that happened in my recovery is, I started working in the field of addiction, and then I started adding, I got other things going on. And at one point I was volunteering for an agency that was foster parent training. And they would use foster care. They'd train people to be foster parents, and then the kids would go into their home. And most often you try to transition them to adoptive parents. And so on any given day, there's hundreds of thousands of kids in the United States foster care system that are waiting for their permanent home. They tend to be the ones that are hard to adopt, tend to be 10 years older, or with special needs. And, so there's a lot going on. So and I won't do the whole story, the whole TJ story, but TJ, my son that I adopted from foster care, his case came before me while I was working for doing some volunteer work for this foster care agency. And through a huge chain of events, I ended up adopting TJ. And that's one of my favorite stories to tell, but that's not what we're doing today. Sure. And so as I started looking at the system, I realized just how screwed up the system was. TJ was in 17 different foster care placements in a 24-month period. And
wow, that's just crazy.
Yeah, he was on multiple medications that were just, psychotropic medications that some weren't even approved for children.
Wow.
And I started to realize that, these kids get placed in foster care for no fault of their own. Their families have addiction issues, families die, whatever happens. But these kids get in foster care and they don't really have an advocate. There's people, foster care caseworker could have up to 60 kids on her caseload. And so she can't manage that. And there are some really nice foster care parents out there. And there's also some foster care parents that do it for the money. And there's also some foster care parents that do it for really, really disgusting reasons as well. Wow. Yeah. So, the system does its best to weed out those people, but you can't always get everybody. And so kids that go into foster care have for a period of time, girls have almost a 88% chance of being, sexually abused, and the boys up to 75%. I mean, that's a mind-blowing number.
Yeah.
So as I started learning more about foster, and TJ was doing fantastic. One of the first things I did was get him off all the medications that he didn't need to be on of them. He did need a little bit of stimulant medication, but the rest of it was just, it just was, he was miserable. He was taken from his family, and they just kept trying to zone him out, and he just, he was rebelling against the system. So TJ thrived
Mm.
under me. Um, and after TJ was with me for a year or two, I ended up adopting another son, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Chris was in foster care with his. He had a younger brother, and they just weren't placed together because their behaviors were so enmeshed. So I adopted Chris, and he did real well. He didn't have as much. I didn't have as much issues with him, earlier with TJ. But I also saw how the system sort of pass these kids along, and just
Right.
the doctors they would see. And I'm not being judgmental. I guess I am being judgmental, so let me tell you ahead of time. But the
Well,
psychiatrists
honestly, how
they would
about that?
see, yeah, I'll be judgmental. These are not the psychiatrists that sit down and talk to a kid. These are the psychiatrists that never even ask the kid a question. They'll ask, okay, what's going on? Well, he's acting oppositionally. So I'll give him an oppositional defiant disorder diagnosis. I'll do this. He's this. So here's these 5 medications for this kid. And they're in and
Wow.
out in 7 minutes. The doctor charges
Wow.
the state $150 for that appointment.
Wow.
So also the system is messed up in a way that when also just with that the continuous timeline. Just a few years ago, 2016, I adopted my son Justin. He was 10 in foster care. He's still with me. He's doing fantastic, and
Right.
he's in a senior year in high school, so he's great.
Just
But
turned 18, I believe.
yes, he just turned 18, and
Right.
yes, he's at his girlfriend's right now. So he's doing the 18-year-old world. So it's really cool to see him. He's just thriving. But when I got Justin, I got a call from the disabilities board. I didn't know what they wanted, and they were like, "Well, we need to give him," and I forget the term, but they were going to the amount of money, the stipend they pay me or offered to pay me was based on how disabled or how many problems Justin had. So the lady was saying, I said, "There's nothing wrong with this kid. He's fine." She goes, No, Mr. Elston. We need to, his ADD's bad. Is he depressed? And I go, "No, his ADD's under control. I'm sure he's a little depressed, but the kid's right." And she kept trying to talk me into, "Well, if we have more things, you can get more money." And
Oh,
I go,
wow.
I said, "I don't
Wow.
need or want any money, but yet there's a stipend you get based on how disabled they are." And also, when they're in group homes or they're in traditional or therapeutic foster care, the higher that rating is of how disabled or how damaged or how problematic they are, the more the system pays the people to take care of them. So there's a built-in bias to make these kids sound much worse than they are.
Wow.
So imagine a foster care of somebody that's not doing it the right way. They have 3 foster care kids in their home, and they can go in and say all these things are wrong. This kid's really defiant. He's doing all things. The doctor then will medicate them to match what they're saying. Then they'll raise the amount of money that the people get, and it can be
Wow.
substantial. And
Oh my God.
so the system is set up to make these kids look as bad as possible. They put these dangerous psychotropic medications that really screw up their brain, and they're not treated well. They have nobody to advocate for them.
Yeah.
So I realized that the system is so bad, and nobody is out there. There's, and when I say nobody, of course there's people trying,
Sure.
and I have run across some really good caseworkers that are trying really hard. But when you have an overwhelming caseload, and not every caseworker really cares, the turnover rate at social services is outrageous. It's very stressful. The adoption unit is very difficult to work in. The turnover rate is, so you can have, a worker change over 3 or 4 times, and when one person leaves, let's say you have 35 kids on your caseload and an adoption worker leaves. Well, that caseload distributed among the other 4 people in the office, and that happens, and now they increase the caseload. The kids aren't given any really consistent advice, or they don't have anybody they can really depend on. So the system is so destroyed, and we have people advocating for many things, but there's nobody really advocating for these are hidden kids. They're everybody's like, oh yeah, well yeah, we got foster care kids, but they just don't understand how bad the system is for them. Foster care kids that don't find their permanent home, males in particular, there's a lot of stats here, and I'm gonna use generalized stats because I was trying to get some exact stats here, and they're all over the place, so I don't want to be misquoted and saying I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But males who out of foster care and they don't get any transitional help, they have a 74% to an 84% increase in going to jail than the average child that turns into an adult. So one of the first things that happens, they can't get a job. They're put out on the streets and they can't get a job. There's not many ways for an 18-year-old with no experience to make money. And it's usually selling drugs, it's usually sexual, it's usually or whatever, but it's not, they're not going to college and they don't have the backup of parents. These kids are just out there. And their behavior at that point probably is criminal. And so they're just all a bunch of criminal kids and they end up in jail. And they often have a much greater reduced lifespan because they're just, there's no connection. They're not taking care of themselves. They're in and out of jail. The girls that are in foster care that age out of the system almost overwhelmingly end up in prostitution. They get pregnant. They have another kid that's put into foster care, is taken from them, and these cycles just keep repeating over and over and over. And again, we have no one stepping in where the average, like you said, nobody even knew it was National Adoption Month. And with all the children that are looking for a home, that's why me adopting him at 10 years old. I really hope Justin's an amazing young man. And I really hope somebody else would have come along. But statistically, if somebody didn't come along, he would not be having the life he has today. And that's very sad. And so the idea that we certainly need to work on this, here's a stat that blew me away. If just one family, and the reason I use churches is churches are often, very pro-life, they call them. So I respect their beliefs. So if you're really pro-life and you really want to save a life, if one family in 1 in 5 churches were to adopt one kid out of foster care, all the kids in foster care would be adopted. We'd have no backlog.
Wow.
None.
Wow.
So I'm always challenging. Yeah. So I actually go to churches often. I haven't been doing it as much lately, but I've not only have I adopted 3 children from foster care, but I have over 40 children. I have been, and I'm not claiming me, but me and other people have worked to find adoptive homes. And while that's a drop in the bucket, that's 40.
It's still that's an achievement.
Yeah, it's 40, and it just, those lives are changed, and and any future kids they have are going to be changed. So if you look at sort of the expansive effect of that, you're sort of like the butterfly effect from that. It's life changing for a lot of people down the road generationally. So trying to advocate for these kids and trying to make people be aware. So most people think, well, I don't have any money. I'm single. I'm divorced. I'm gay. I have an apartment. I have, so I can't adopt. I'm too old. And the truth is that other than being a pedophile, there's no real barrier to adopting a kid. There are crimes. Robbing a bank or something, a violent crime, can be a barrier. However, if that's 10 years ago and you've turned your life around, that possibly could even get a waiver and do that. So you don't have to be a perfect person. I mean, again, Walt, they let me adopt kids. I mean, wow. So, that's like, they let Joel do it.
The way you say that, it sounds like you're like the last gasp choice, but that's not the case at all.
But I mean, it's possible. But the idea though, that people, they say, well, I couldn't do that. Well, first of all, it's free to adopt from foster care. It's free. There's no cost to that. Most states provide a pretty substantial sort of reimbursement to help offset the cost until they're 18.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot. They get free Medicaid, which the really good stuff,
Mm-hmm.
complete medical coverage and dental coverage and everything until they're 18.
Mm-hmm.
So they come with a lot of things that help offset what people perceive barriers. One of the more enlightened, I guess enlightened the word. There was a lady in South Carolina that she was a volunteer for foster care work. She was a 62-year-old female, white female. And that's relevant here in a minute. And so there's this girl in foster care who she just became very close to. She was a 16-year-old African American female, and she had never found her home, and she had accepted that I'm just probably not going to be adopted. So this 62-year-old lady and her just hit it off. They were just, they were on a committee together. And so 62-year-old lady at the time was like, looked into adopting her. And one of the questions at the time was, is she too old? As a 62-year-old, is she too old? Well, my argument was, the kid's 16, she's 62, and if the young lady had 1 year with a mom, I mean, if she had 6 months with a mom, I mean, is that better than this? And so, of course, they were able to get all that approved, and it turned out to be the absolute perfect match. The young lady ended up going to college, became a nurse, and when as her mom aged and needed help, she moved in and took care of her mom until her mom passed away.
Wow.
So, the idea that you can't make a difference when you're older, or, in these perceived ideas, because when I talk to people about, oh no, I could never do that, or no, it's something that the people I'm really hoping that people realize there's a low barrier to entry, and you don't have to be the perfect parent. There's no such thing, by the way. And you learn as you go. And I always say the only thing that you really need to adopt a kid is a sense of humor, a little space in your house, and have a thick skin. I mean, because if you have that, then eventually it's going to work out absolutely fine. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. It's also the most rewarding thing you'll ever do. So when you look at all of this, you see that this in our country with so much wealth and so much, and I'm happy for everybody. I'm a big advocate, as you know, law of attraction person. I'm not anti-wealth at all, but yet we have this population that is easy to overlook. They don't have a lobby. There's nobody lobbying for these kids because they have no money. By the time they're 16 or 17, they are mentally they're jaded, and they're usually pretty and it's a hard passion. It's a hard thing to break. But adopting a kid that's 10, 11, and 12, there's a transition period of time. But I always liked it because TJ was 11, Chris was 8, and Justin was 10 when they first moved in. I never had to change a diaper. I never had to clean up poop or pee. I was so happy with that. I mean, there were some great benefits because I said, I'm not doing any of that stuff. And, and so the idea that you could, I looked at it as a benefit that I didn't have to do that. And, it's the greatest thing that I've ever done. I've done a lot in my life. And when I say that, I mean that not in an arrogant way, but it's the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done. I hope that's my legacy, not the money I made or the stuff I did. I hope it's that somehow that, hey, I did this. I'm single, and I had especially with TJ, I had no clue what I was doing early. I just sort of, okay, let's figure this out, and we did. And as I said, TJ was in 17 different foster care placements in a 24-month period until mine, and that was his last placement. And he and for those that don't know, TJ at 23 passed away in a car accident, but was living a very good life, and he was engaged to be married and everything. So he's just really attests to what an incredible spirit and resilient. Most of these foster care kids are really resilient. They've been through so much, and bringing an awareness to this and bringing people to the idea that there's within our walls. And again, I know we have a lot of stuff going on in the world. There's a lot of stuff that needs attention, but within our own country, we have hundreds of thousands of children that don't have a permanent home, and it's it seems like when I say that to myself, why does that not hit home with everybody else? It's just, it hits me in a weird way that's not like, wow, this is a really big deal. We should be talking about this more, but it's not.
And I get the impression, correct me if I'm wrong, but I get the impression that this is something that you came to over time, and because really this whole concept of adopting somebody, it wasn't something you had pre-planned. It's not something that you had been thinking about for years and said, oh, I'm going to do that at some point. It just, it kind of fell in your lap unexpectedly, didn't it?
It did. And, you know, I had, my 20s were a little, let's call it exciting. My 20s were exciting.
Slightly.
Yes, I was, had a pretty wild time with addiction. I had a couple year period. I was dating strippers, and, you know, the lifestyle that goes with that. So I had a wild 20s. And when I got in recovery in my early 30s, I, really didn't have, I hadn't found anybody that I could ever imagine marrying. You know what I mean? But I
Right.
always loved the idea of, being a dad. But in my addiction, I had stolen a bunch of money from a company that I worked for and ended up getting a felony charge. So I assumed there would never be a possibility to adopt. I never even considered really adopting. But as I was working in this program, volunteering, training these foster care parents, that they approached me about adopting TJ because they said, somebody like you would have the best shot because, I'm not easily, I have a thick skin. Nothing he's going to say is going to upset me. And, I tend to just, okay, we'll figure it out. Everything doesn't get to the end of the world with me. I've always sort of been that way. As you know, Walt, I can find humor in just about any scenario.
This is true. I can attest to that. Yes.
Yeah. So, and so I just, but they approached me, and I actually thought about going, can I do that? I was able to do it. And like I said, I had a felony conviction for my theft. And you're able to get what they call a waiver, like a rehabilitated citizen. I was I owned an addiction treatment center in South Carolina. And like the judge was saying, said, hey, at this point, there's nobody else. I mean, why not? I mean, of course, that's not even a question. We're not going to impede TJ having the only shot of a home he's ever going to have. So it was sort of thrust on me. And I mean, when I say that, I mean, it was offered. I thought about it, and, I'm like, well, that sounds like I can do that. And I did. And it just, so randomly within a month of all this being discussed, I had a kid in my house, and, it was like, well, this is weird. And him and I, at first it was a little rough. He tried to push me away early because so many people had kicked him out of their house. So, we had that week or two of him trying to be a little ass and get kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't work. And then after a while he settled in, and everything went great from there. So, my desire to adopt wasn't like a lifelong thing, but as I discovered the absurd number of kids that don't have homes, that's when my advocacy really started to increase. Nobody's out there looking for these kids a home. I mean, again, their caseworkers they're listed on websites, but they're not promoted. I want to go introduce you to them. I want to, when you see a kid, you talk to a kid. And, I used to put a kid in my car and take them to a church. Say, hey, let's, they never like that, by the way. So
you always were really good at making friends and influencing people. That was like top of your list.
Yeah. And so, over the years, whatever it takes to help find these kids, a lot of my friends that have gotten older, I've had one of my favorite adoption cases is I lived in South Carolina. So a lot of this took place in South Carolina several years ago. So I met this dentist at the gym. He's a really nice guy. And I wasn't in South Carolina when this happened, but as we got close, he told me that when he was younger, his daughter at 17 was killed in a car wreck. and him and his wife were devastated. And so, that was something. I wasn't there for that event. Well, a few years after I found out that information, it wasn't my plan to do this, but there was this girl that her parents were killed in a car wreck, and really bright girl, honor student. She's 16, had no immediate family, and I could not have her going to the foster care system because it's a crapshoot on who you get. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I literally showed up at the house of these people, and I said, I got the craziest idea. And I laid out everything, and they were like, "No, we could never do that." I just kept talking. I said, I'm about to. If I can't, I can get an emergency placement here. This girl, I cannot have her spend a night at a foster care home. She just, I can't take that chance. So I literally
Joel,
begged them.
Excuse me a second. I just need to ask you to keep telling the story. My browser just froze up, so I need to exit the browser and come back in about 30 seconds. So just keep telling the story, and I'll be bouncing back in momentarily.
Okay, great. So I kept talking to them about, please, would you do this? They agreed to do it. We got them quickly approved, and the process was relatively smooth, especially when everybody's motivated to do the things the right way. And they got her into technically their foster parents at first. They immediately applied for adoption. It was an expedited process. So this family, in an amazing way, they ended up adopting this young lady. They lost their daughter. She had lost her parents, and she eventually ended up going to college. She became a dentist herself. And so, again, that was a story that really hit home. And what happens if there's not somebody there to advocate as strongly, and not, if she would have got just put into the system and never got adopted, her life would have gone in an incredibly different way. So to me, it's most important that we got to, I wish more people were advocating, more people would consider adopting. If you can't adopt, let's figure out a way to promote kids that need homes, and not look at the stigma. Yes, I have people that will often say, well, if I adopt, I don't know what I'm going to get. Well, if you have a baby, you don't know what you're going to get. It doesn't, there's no possible way of determining that. But also, if you look at what more purpose could there be on life to, be an advocate for these young people that just have no one to advocate for them. And it's what I hear about, and I'm not trying to say whatever other cause matters, but everybody's advocating, but nobody really seems to think about this group very much, because it's just an underserved, underrepresented group that has no voice. But we give them a voice. When I try, I'm always trying to give a voice. I tell the story about a young man often on the show that we've talked about over the years, who basically was in foster care, and he very much a little law of attraction kid.
Right.
It's an incredible story how he turned his life around, and he was eventually adopted by a family, and he's in college. They're about to be in college. I haven't talked to him in a while. Just an amazing turnaround from this defiant kid that was on like 9 medications, and the doctor was telling him that everybody was telling him you're oppositionally defiant, you're depressed, and all these other things. Well, the kid said, yeah, my mom died while she's in prison. I'm a little depressed. Yes.
Yeah.
And, what the hell? That's sort of his point of view.
Which makes sense. I mean, who wouldn't be if you go through something like that? It just kind of makes sense. But I got a question for you, though. I got a question for you, because I'm going to kind of hypothesize that maybe we have somebody listening who they're kind of intrigued by this idea, but they also have some concerns. I'm going to see if I can imagine what some of those concerns might be, just based on what you've been telling us more than anything else. So one of the first things that comes to my mind is you talked about how it can be really tough, which of course is also going to be true of, if you're having your own kid, that can also be tough. But you've also outlined how kids who are in the foster care system, they've already been through a bunch of junk, and especially the older ones, they've got a number of issues that in this telling of the story, as you've been telling it, they've been kind of imposed on the kid, but nevertheless, the issues are there. So I can imagine one of the things that's going to scare somebody is, my God, how am I going to deal with all this crazy stuff that this kid is bringing to the table? It's hard enough to just deal with a normal kid, but now I'm dealing with somebody who's, got all these issues coming in.
That's a great question. And the process that I like to recommend, because that would be one of the first things that I ask too, is everywhere that I'm aware of, so I'm assuming it's nationwide, but there's regular foster care, which is run by the state, and then there's a thing called therapeutic foster care.
No.
If you go through a therapeutic foster care to get approved, that comes with a team of psychologists and therapists, and they have your back. They help set appointments. They help deal with all this. They not everybody is prepared to deal with there's going to be some psychological, trauma, even in something happy like an adoption. The adoption, while certainly is a joyous moment in my world 3 separate times, I'm also aware that adoption is the destruction of another family too. So while they lost one family, they gained another family. So I have to honor that's there. So having a team. And I'm pretty well trained, so I don't necessarily need a therapeutic, but I still went use the therapeutic foster placement to get everything in place with Justin. And they do all the paperwork. They do everything for the adoption. I don't have to do any of that stuff.
Cool.
And I certainly had influence, because I let them know that he's getting off all these medications. And so it isn't like they're going to say, we're going to override you on that, but they helped me do all that. And
okay,
I changed doctors immediately. I have access to a lot of doctors here in town and friends. So my dear friend and mentor, Dr. Sherman Master, stepped in. He helped me out in the beginning of what we needed and ways to taper Justin off some of the medications he was on. He wasn't on that many, but he didn't need to be on any at all. So your answer is going through a therapeutic foster care. You can always research that in your city on Google. But therapeutic foster care providers in your area, they will train you to be a foster parent. They will provide support with whatever the kid's going through in the adjustment period. And if your goal is to adopt at that point, which hopefully it is, then they will walk through the process of adoption. Imagine a team of people. When Justin was in therapeutic foster placement, within I have something in my throat, right? And give me just a second. Let me reach more.
Yeah, it takes a second there, and I'm going to just kind of go on for about 30 seconds, because as you're talking, it's occurring to me that there are a few issues that we need to address here, and you're starting to address them, which I'm really liking. But let me just lay out a couple for you. One thing that I really want us to look at is you described how there's this therapeutic support system, which is great, but we also know that there can be problems with the way even therapy is done today. So, I mean, one of the first questions is, how do you deal with the therapists, the people who are there apparently to help you? But I mean, I think a lot of us could actually know when a therapist is getting in the way. Yeah. And how do you handle that?
You handle it like you would your own kid going to therapy. If it's not a good fit, you find another one.
Okay.
I'm very much, there's a lot of good therapists out there, and there's a lot of bad therapists.
Right.
A good therapist can help. A bad therapist can damage. You're better off with no therapist than a bad therapist. So
right, exactly.
So you have that ability to find that therapist. If it's not going, if it's you get to. I'm very much. This is shocking to many of you probably, but I'm very much. Yes, this happened. We were going to move on. So I don't need a therapist that's going to try to reinforce trauma forever and ever and ever. I'm about, we certainly deal with it, but at some point we're going to be launching on from that. So we're not going to become an identity of a traumatized person. We're going to grow from that. And if somebody doesn't use that mindset, I'm going to find a therapist that's going to do that. I don't need a therapist that's going to sit there and reinforce victimhood.
So just kind of reinforce the idea. I mean, it sounds like you need to be somebody who can really just take charge and say, okay, here's what I'm willing to accept. Here's what I'm not willing to accept. And I'm willing to go after what it is that needs to be changed. You have to have something about that in your personality.
Yeah, but just like a parent would, again, no different because it's a foster care kid. This is like any parent would do. If your kid's at school, he needs he's having some issues and you have to have a meeting at school, you're going to advocate for that kid. Same thing.
Right. Okay. All right.
So
This is not like, well, like any kind of child raising. It's not for the faint of heart. This is something
no,
you got to feel like you got something going for you.
Sure. Well, you need, you have to be, number one, you have to have self-confidence. You have to be
Right.
Because one thing that is always going to happen, if you get especially a young teenager or preteen, you better be secure in how you look, because they're going to find every flaw to pick on you about. It's just what they do. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's just, so you're going to have to understand that that's any kid. So just be prepared. Don't be worried about those things. And also understand that these kids who have been traumatized, many of them will try to push you away in the beginning, so you don't hurt them. Meaning they're protective. Like, I don't want you to kick me out, so I want to piss you off so bad you're going to kick me out.
Which is really odd logic, but you can see it. It does have a certain logic to it.
Yeah, they've had their heart broken several times. So, so again, TJ, with all those placements, after about a week or two, he realized this crazy man is not going to kick me out. So he all of a sudden stopped trying. He's like, okay, well, I guess I'm here. So,
right.
because I mean, nothing he did upset me. It's like, I would just sort of laugh at it or whatever. And he's like, well, that's not working. So, and so I'm the grown up. I always say, if you're getting into a pissing contest with your kids, excuse my language, you're getting into a pissing contest with your kids, they're winning. I don't do that. I just, if they drag you into an argument, they won already. You're the grown up. They're the kid.
That's actually a very good point, because, and it's kind of a way of pre-screening yourself. If you're somebody who's constantly in pissing contests with everybody else, you're probably not a good candidate to do this in the first place.
No. And if you're worried about pee on your toilet, don't foster care, because there's going to be some pee on the toilet. If you're worried about the toilet paper rolls not being replaced, trust me, that's not ever going to happen.
So if you're OCD, not exactly the best move to become an adoptive parent.
One potential foster parent that we were training that I immediately rejected when she told me, she said, well, I don't like fingerprints on my refrigerator. And I go, okay, well,
that could be a problem.
If that's going to be a deterrent, I mean, wow, we got a lot going on. So yes, not everybody is fit for this. It is certainly, but it also can bring.
I just have to admit, I got to throw in a little side note here. I'm going to have to test after we're done to see, can I leave a fingerprint on a refrigerator? Is that actually possible to do with the finishes of the refrigerators today? I'm just kind of curious.
I never heard of such a thing. So, but until that lady said it to you, and it's like when I hear complaints, when I was, as I work with these families, like, he never puts the toilet seat up or down or whatever. I'm like, that's just okay. Yes, we're not gonna pick that. If you're worried about stuff like that, then it's probably not a good thing.
Probably not a good fit.
Yeah.
So really, this is all more about knowing yourself rather than knowing the kid.
Yes, because you're going to be able to influence the kid to a certain degree, but the kid's on his own journey. The kid's going to be they're on their own journey. So it's like just being able to accept their own journey. And people that have if you're really hell bent on your religious beliefs, for example, you can't make a 10-year-old believe the way you believe. You can't.
Doesn't work.
You know what I'm saying? You can offer what it has. You can do that. But people think, well, I'm gonna make them do this. It's like, no, you're not.
Good luck.
Good luck. And again, if that's a deterrent, then maybe because I see a lot of people. And again, I no disrespect to any one religion, but I've seen people like in a Christian church a Baptist church, for example, they're like, well, he's got to go to church, Sunday, Monday night or Wednesday night, all that, it's all this, and he has to do all this stuff, and he has to do all that, and he has to be involved in the church. And, it's like, you can try that, but it's just, at some point, you're going to have to accept he's got his own beliefs. He has his own background. And uh, I tend to, with Justin, with all my kids, they'll ask me what my beliefs are. I'll tell them what my beliefs are. And, they're like Justin one time said, "What are we?" And I go, "I don't know what you are, but here's what I am." And, you figure it out. And, he has his own, views. I influence him to some degree.
Sure.
But it's like, he's got to figure that out himself. This is his journey. So if you're worried about, if you can't accept or allow, then you got to. You're still a parent. You get the influence. Like you got to wear pants to school. I mean, there's certain rules you got to do. You got to follow societal rules to a degree, but at the same time, you can't worry about the minutia too much, and that's the hard thing for some people.
And probably another indicator as to whether or not you're a good candidate, if you're somebody who has a tendency to get into a primary relationship, a boyfriend, girlfriend, maybe marriage, something along that line, with somebody with the idea that you're going to change them for the better, that's probably an indication of somebody who isn't going to be good for this, because they're going to try to do the same thing with the kid and it's not going to work. Because it's just like it doesn't work in the primary relationship. It doesn't work either way. But if you're someone who does that, it's good to know that about yourself and say, okay, I'm not going to become an adoptive parent.
Right. Yeah. And realize if your need to fix or change and all that, you're going to get really frustrated because you're ignoring the previous years of this kid's life, 10, 12 previous years. So you don't get to go in and just start, I want to go fix this from day one. Now, is our goal to help them improve and help them see? Absolutely. That it's to help them, give them their tools for their journey. Mm-hmm. But you can't, the idea that if it's my way or the highway kind of thinking, it just doesn't work.
I think it's the difference between being an authority and being a resource.
Yes.
Being somebody who's there to help versus being somebody who's there to give instruction and tell somebody how to live.
Yes. And it's a lot of people, I think that, and to be honest with you, I think that's a better parenting method for most part in general anyway. Well, sure. You again, you have the basics you have to do, but the idea that, just because I heard this statement one time and I thought it made me think, somebody said, "Well, how did your family do it?" And I go, "Well, my family was crazy." I mean, so let's use that as a blueprint of what not to do,
Right.
Let's do that. Yeah. So I wouldn't want anybody to grow up in the childhood I had, Lord, that they were crazy. So, and recognizing that this is nothing that's worthwhile is easy. It's just, I'm a big believer in effort, and there's value in effort. There's value in work. There's value in those things that, it's fulfilling to do the work, so to speak. So, watching these kids, sort of develop and then be able to support when you can, and at the same time allow. That's one of the greatest things to sort of witness and to watch them become people, watch them become their own opinion. And Justin and I have some very different opinions on things, but he knows he can talk to me about them, and I can talk to him. And I'm like, and my main thing to him is, the stuff, Justin, if that bothers you, I said, my only challenge to you is, I don't care how you believe, but if it bothers you, that they're controlling you if it bothers you. So let go. So we're working on that, but he's doing great. And as I said, it's the most rewarding thing that you could possibly do. But also the big factor here, Walt, is one of the things I did was doing in South Carolina for a long time is I was on the I would interview people to see if they would be good to foster adopt, right? Mm-hmm. And so this one couple comes in one time, and I give them credit for being honest. They had he had a good job. She had a good job, actually. They had a really nice house, and they did well financially, and they had a grown daughter. And I asked, "Why do you want to adopt?" And the guy said, "Our marriage is in trouble, and I think adopting will bring us together."
Ooh.
And I said, "I really appreciate your honesty." I said, "But we can end this right now."
Yeah.
It will ruin your marriage. It is guaranteed. Your marriage would be over. If it's on the rocks now, the stress of this is going to. So you need if you're married and you're going to go through this, you need a really solid marriage. This will not fix your marriage. It will strain your marriage. At the end, I think your marriage will be stronger, but it's going to,
if you survive it. Yes.
yes, it's going to pull at the fabric of your marriage, because the kids are manipulative. They're going to play one against the other.
And they're good at
brilliant. They're brilliant. Yes, and they know the button, and they know this one and know that one. And so if your marriage is in trouble, do not, under any circumstances, bring a foster care kid in or adopt. It won't work.
Okay. So we've identified a few different ways to in a sense, rule yourself out if you're somebody who needs to be ruled out. But let's assume, for the sake of discussion, that we're still talking to people are listening who don't get ruled out by the things we've talked about so far. You mentioned how very rewarding it is to adopt and to live an adoptive lifestyle like that. But let's talk about, why is that so rewarding? What's so good about that? What is it that makes you feel like, wow, this is so worthwhile? I can't imagine why more people wouldn't want to do it.
Well, for me, it is. It's been such a. In my mind, you're changing the life of a kid. You're giving them an opportunity. That bigger thing is just super exciting to me. That you could pull somebody out of a horrible. I always say I level the playing field for my kids. I can't fix them, but I can level the playing field. They were in a very unlevel playing field, and I can level that playing field. So there's satisfaction to be able to level that playing field. But there's also, the connection you make. These are your kids. They, you get to know them. You get to know them very well. You become very comfortable. Their accomplishments, even their sorrows and stuff. You're going through that. Just like any relationship, it can be very fulfilling. I feel that, like, I'm not married, and having Justin or any of my other kids, it's the companionship is awesome. Having somebody to just hang out with and do that, but not that we're dependent on each other, but it just brings somebody into the equation that it makes a difference, and you get to meet their friends, and then it also opens up things socially on some level. People that I would never ever meet or talk to, I've met through other kids, their families and stuff like that.
Okay.
So it opens up just a sort of a new networking type world. It also opens up a perspective of an accomplishment, to say that that. Again, these kids were on a really, they were, due to no fault of their own, they were on a really bad path, and somehow I intercepted that. I changed that and gave them a better shot. I can't guarantee it, but people want accomplishments. What bigger accomplishments than an accomplishment than being able to change the trajectory of a kid's life and give them an opportunity they had zero shot of having before? That's fulfilling.
Do you think that that as an adoptive father, like you said, you've adopted 3 times. Do you think that those adoptive experiences have affected you in terms of how you relate to yourself, how your relationship to yourself, the way that you think about yourself? Does it make you a more challenged person? Does it make you a more integrated person? Or does it not really touch that at all?
I don't know if it changes me as a person, but some of my perspectives have changed. And I'll give you a story that I may have shared this recently on the show, but it's more pertinent now. So it's helped me develop as a person in certain areas of what weakness would be. And when TJ was 14, he pulled up at the house in the back of a police car, and he had been caught at the park with a bag of marijuana. And I was the head of an addiction treatment center in that hometown. The cop knew who I was. I'm not trying to be Mr. Big Shot, but I was sort of known as the addiction guy. And so here I am talking to the police officer. Yeah, I caught TJ at the skate park. I asked him what was in his pocket, and he told me marijuana. And I'm like, okay, well, TJ, that's, just literally said, here it is. and I was furious. I was furious, and I'm not happy that TJ was smoking pot at 14. That's not exciting, but he's not the only kid at 14 that was smoking pot.
Mm,
Every kid at that park was down there doing that.
probably.
Yeah, and but my reaction to it was way over the top. I was furious. I was embarrassed that the cop brought him there. The cop's like, "Look, nobody cares." I said, at first I told you, just take him to jail. And he said, "I'm not taking him to jail for pot. Just, you know." So, so we get in the house, and TJ, just like, I don't see where this is that big of a deal. I go, "You're not going to use pot while you're in my house. You're not going to do these things." So he had a phone. This is back in the day. So the Razor was the expensive, cool phone at the time.
Right.
So I said, "Give me your phone." I snapped the phone in half, threw it on the
I
ground,
love
said,
that part. You
"No more
snapped
phone."
it in
Yeah,
half. You
yeah,
had to
yeah,
actually ruin the phone. I
yeah,
love
yeah,
that.
yeah. I destroyed. Yeah, and of course I said, "You just go upstairs. You're on restriction until I tell you you're off of it for a month." And I'm sitting there, and I did that, and I go, "God, that was all my ego. What the hell? That was my that had nothing to do with TJ. I was embarrassed because I'm sort of the big shot addiction guy, and my ego
Right.
was embarrassed that this cop pulled up to my house. And I realized, I'm like, you know, while I'm not condoning that 14-year-olds shouldn't be smoking pot. I'm also saying that my reaction was damaging. It was,
Mm.
it's one of my worst parenting mistakes I'd ever made. Um, and I felt horrible. I love TJ, and my pathetic little ego was so damaged by being embarrassed that, again, it was never about TJ in the pot. It was about who I was in the pot. That was the thing. So we
Right.
go into I go upstairs, and I said, "Hey, buddy," I said, "I have nothing but an apology. And I've never had to apologize to TJ before." So, I mean, he was sort of looking at me like, "Or is this a trick or something?" And I go,
Yeah. Right.
I said, "Look," I said, "the pot, no, stop that. And you can't bring it home. And why would you just hand it to the cop saying, we have so many things to talk about. You don't say, yeah, I got pot in my pocket." I mean, there's, there's a whole bunch of things we need to talk about. But, you know, the idea, when I got so angry at you, it's because I was worried about what other people thought. And
Mm.
I love you more than I care about what other people think. So I'm sorry I acted that way. I'll promise I will try hard, never do that again. I'll get you a new phone tomorrow. And you accept my apology. And he goes, "Of course, I never heard a grown up apologize before." And I said, "Well,
Mm. Wow.
I'm really wrong. I'm really wrong here." And believe it or not, that got us closer. So what my worst parenting moment, to be a little, braggy here, turned into probably my best parenting moment a few minutes later. So
Yeah.
it probably balances a little bit, but just being able to. So you're asking the question, how to fit. It made me look at me and my perceptions of myself and what mattered to me. Going from a single guy that was pretty, spoiled, doing whatever I wanted to do, to having a kid. I had to put his interests in front of mine, and sometimes my ego was a little challenged by that.
Which makes a lot of sense, actually, because if I think about it in terms of just, daily interaction with people, it's our interactions with others that lead us to situations where we find ourselves challenging ourselves. And that's
Yes,
really what happened in this case. It
yes,
almost doesn't even matter that it was a foster kid or an adopted kid. It was a person in your life. And that happens
yes,
all the time with us. So what
yes,
what I think we can kind of draw from this is adding an adoptive kid into your life is adding one more person for you to interact with, to help, to grow from, to basically have all the same kinds of experiences you have with other people that you have in your life.
yes,
It's just
yes.
it just happens to be an adoptive kid.
Yes, and so I really equate that a lot to my growth, uh, having to, and mine was mostly ego stuff, and so it helped
Hmm.
me a lot with sort of adjusting my ego and my beliefs that somehow, like, wait a minute, I'm acting this way, at responding against my child, or being loud and screaming at child, because I worried about what some random cop thinks, or what if it gets out. I remember saying, what if people find out about it? And I'm going,
Mm.
what if, I mean, do you know my story? I mean, What? Why am I worried about this now? I didn't like,
Right.
of all the things I've done, that didn't move the bar. TJ having pot. Um, so I really think that with each one, I had to learn more patience. I had to
Mhm.
accept, again, that statement earlier. There's a lot of times that I have to accept this is their journey. It's not my journey
Mm.
for them. I can offer advice. I can be there. Like with Justin, him and I will have some really good conversations. He had a dilemma that when he was 18, he came to me, and it was a really, really great moment. And he goes, I don't know what to do. And I said, well, you're 18. I can't protect you from the consequences of what happens anymore. I mean, but I can give you advice. I think if you make a decision based on what you're making a decision on, what is in your best interest? What could happen? And it was we had a wonderful conversation. I didn't tell him what to do. He
Mhm.
said, so it's really my choice. I said, this is your life, buddy. I love you, and I expect you're going to make the right decision. But no matter what your decision, I'll back it. But the consequences, if it goes wrong, will be yours to deal with. And
Mm.
I can sit there with you for the consequence, but I can't accept it. And explain, until you're 18, I got your back. Nobody's in my county is going to do it. Like if we go to court
Yeah.
and, I got you covered. Don't worry. But 18, they don't listen to that anymore.
Right. Yeah. So what I'm taking away from this is it's really not significantly different after all from having your own kid. I mean, there
It's
are going to be some differences. Let's not
sure
pretend that there aren't. But by and large, it's pretty much got very much the same kind of experience.
it is. And that's the thing that I always try to tell people is, everything that we're talking about right now about foster care and things we deal with adopted kids, I work with families with their biological kids on the same issues. So,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
we and I work with the parents, and the egos about the parents of well, your actions are. I'm not worried about you as much as I'm worried about what my friends will think if you do that. It's like, well,
Mm.
that's time.
Whoops.
And so apparently we
Oh,
lost Walt again. There's Walt.
before it
There
was
you go.
me
Whoop.
getting knocked
Yeah.
around and I had to remove myself. Now it's Joel removing himself here. So let's see if we can get him reconnected. It'll be about a second. There he is. Okay, now he's back.
Yeah, there he goes. Okay,
Yep.
so yeah, that was weird. But I'm just so much of a believer that we're put here for our journey. We come here for a journey, and if you really want to experience life fully, be able to approach it, there's no better journey than going this one. I feel like I have. If you look at the entirety of my life, and there's a lot that went wrong early, and we can all agree on that. But I don't think that anybody has ever lived of just a more. I lived life. I have lived life. I'm still living life, but I have really had all aspects. And adopting kids is way up there in my greatest accomplishments in my mind.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I just feel like it doesn't make up for the crap I did earlier, but it's just sort of it shows the person that I've become. And I've never claimed to be a perfect dad, but I have to admit I'm a pretty good dad, and
I
you
imagine you
know,
are.
yeah. And so and that's something I'm proud of. And there's really nothing I'd rather be known for. I've done a lot of things, have a lot of accomplishments, but being a good dad and also just being a good parent when you're wrong, admit it. That's with your kids too. It's just such an amazing thing. So if you're of the mindset and you want the biggest challenge of your life, but also to me the greatest reward, looking into it, there's all types of kids available. There's you can choose what race you want, all the what's available. Just go, just consider it. It doesn't hurt to look into it. As I said, a therapeutic foster care program. All you have to do is search that term. There'll be several that pop up in your city, and research it. If right, just researching it doesn't have any requirement attached to it.
If somebody is considering something like this now that they've listened to this episode, and they wanted to talk to you, to ask you some question that Walt hadn't thought of, are you happy to talk to somebody about it?
Absolutely. Best way to reach me, my email address is joelelston@gmail. My name at Gmail. my phone, is on silent all day when I'm in sessions, but I see my emails every day. I would
Right.
certainly respond to that. I could set up a call with you to talk about it, but the best initial reaction is joelelston@gmail.com, and I would love to do that. And if you forgot it, Walt would even forward to me. You could send it to Walt
Absolutely.
too.
Yeah.
So yeah.
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 If you forget Joel Elston at Gmail, just send me a note and I'll make sure it gets to him one way or another.
Yeah.
I promise.
Because that's one topic that I really appreciate your offer tonight to have this as the topic, and you thought of this. It was just, I don't ever get to advocate for this on in this sort of forum, and this is not our normal law of attraction, but at the end of the day, it's something that I think is worth the forum to at least be able to talk about it.
Well, you know what? I think actually it is our normal law of attraction, in the broader sense that I now look at that subject, particularly over the last 1,500 episodes, because after the first 500, I felt like I'd pretty much covered it. But I wanted to keep the conversation going, and I recognized that law of attraction is really in every aspect of our lives. So this is just another aspect of our lives, and therefore it is part of the conversation.
It is, and I also influence my kids a lot. You can imagine. I probably talk about the law of attraction quite a bit with them, and
More
how
than they
that
want,
works.
maybe.
Yeah, sometimes. So one of my funny stories with Justin. Okay, so in my house, I have hundreds of the copies of The Secret around over the
Right.
years. I've given away thousands of the book The Secret. I think The Secret is a great introductory concept to the law of attraction. I love to hand them out freely.
Right.
So Justin has seen these piles of books here. He's heard me talk about this. He's been to talks I've given. And so one day he comes home and he's like, "Yeah, my girlfriend told me about this book, The Secret. Have you ever read it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have. Right? Thanks."
Glad you have too.
Yeah. I said, "Have you ever looked downstairs at those books?" And he's like, "Yeah, I see your book." And I'm like, "So I have hundreds of the copies." He's, "Oh, I never knew that." I go, "Oh." So that's one of my funny stories. That Justin actually asked if I read The Secret. He's been with me to hand it out. You know what I mean? It's just
you could have been smart mouth about it and said, "No, I just hand them out. I don't read them."
yeah. Okay, so I'll let that go, son. You're not paying a lot of attention to what's going on here.
That's a fun way to end the show. I really love that. So, thank you very much for that. One thing I want to mention, I do want to mention this to you though, because in the past, numerous times on the program, both with you on the program and with others as my co-host, I've mentioned how you helped those 40 plus kids get their forever homes, and how important it was that they get them, because otherwise the odds were really, really against them. After doing this show today with you, I think I have an even greater appreciation for the 3 kids that you gave your home to, because that's almost an even greater accomplishment. The number isn't as high, but from everything you're saying, it sounds like the satisfaction level is off the charts.
Yeah, it's again, I think it's my greatest accomplishment. I really do.
Yeah. So good stuff. Thank you very much, my friend. As usual, we had a wonderful topic. We really did it today. Good stuff. And thank you to our podcast listeners everywhere. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.